Once upon a time, in a quiet little village surrounded by golden fields and tall green trees, there lived an old man and an old woman. They lived together in a cozy cottage with a red roof and a small vegetable garden behind it. The old man loved working in his garden. Every morning he would put on his straw hat, take his watering can, and tend to the plants with great care. He grew carrots, potatoes, cabbages, peas, and beans, but above all he was most proud of his turnips. He loved turnips so much that every year he tried to grow the biggest and most delicious one in the village. One spring morning, the old man went out into the garden and planted a few turnip seeds. He gently covered them with soil and watered them. Then he said, "Grow big and strong, my little turnip seeds. Let's see if you can become the biggest turnip in the world." The old woman laughed and shook her head. "You and your turnips," she said. "Last year's was big enough to feed the whole village." But the old man only smiled. He wanted to grow one even bigger. Days turned into weeks and weeks into months. The old man watered the garden every day, pulled out weeds, and watched as his plants grew tall and healthy. The weather was perfect that year, warm days, cool nights, and plenty of rain. One morning, when the old man went to check on his garden, he noticed that one of the turnip plants was growing much faster than all the others. Its leaves were broad and green, and the top of the turnip was starting to show above the ground. "Ah," he exclaimed, "this one will be enormous." The old man continued to care for it with great attention. He talked to it every morning, sprinkled water gently, and even sang little songs to it while pulling out the weeds. The turnip seemed to love the care it was getting, because it kept growing and growing. By midsummer, the turnip had grown so large that it was almost the size of a barrel. The old woman could hardly believe her eyes. "My goodness," she said, "that's the biggest turnip I've ever seen. How are we going to pull it out?" The old man chuckled. "Oh, I'll manage," he said confidently. "When the time is right, I'll pull it out and we'll make enough soup to feed the whole village." But when autumn came and it was time for the harvest, the turnip had grown even more. It was so big that it looked like a giant golden ball sticking out of the earth. The old man rubbed his hands together and said, "Today's the day. Let's pull out the enormous turnip." He grabbed the leafy top with both hands and pulled with all his strength. He pulled and pulled, but the turnip didn't move. He leaned back and pulled even harder, but still it stayed stuck in the ground. The old woman, watching from the window, came out and said, "You'll hurt your back if you keep pulling like that. Let me help you." So the old woman took hold of the old man's waist, and the old man took hold of the turnip's leaves. "Ready," he said. "1, 2, 3, pull." They pulled with all their might, but the enormous turnip did not budge. "Oh dear," the old woman panted. "This turnip really doesn't want to come out. We'll need more help," said the old man. So he called their granddaughter, who was playing near the fence. "Come here, dear. We need your help to pull this enormous turnip." The little girl ran over and took hold of her grandmother's apron. The grandmother held the old man held the turnip, and together they shouted, "1, 2, 3, pull." They pulled and pulled until their faces turned red, but still the turnip did not move. Just then their dog came trotting by, wagging his tail. "Woof, woof," he barked, wondering what all the fuss was about. "Come, dog," said the little girl, "help us pull the enormous turnip." So the dog bit gently onto the little girl's dress and pulled. Now the dog held the girl held the grandmother held the old man, and the old man held the turnip. Together they shouted, "1, 2, 3, They pulled and tugged and strained, but still the enormous turnip did not come out. Next, the cat came by, purring and stretching in the sun. "Come, cat," said the dog, "help us pull this enormous turnip." The cat meowed, flicked its tail, and joined in. The cat held the dog's tail, the dog held the girl held the grandmother held the old man, and the old man held the turnip. They all shouted together, "1, 2, 3, pull," but the turnip still stayed firmly in the ground. A little while later, a mouse came scurrying past. He stopped and twitched his whiskers. "What's going on here?" he squeaked. "We're trying to pull out this enormous turnip," said the cat. The mouse tilted his tiny head. "An enormous turnip. I love turnips. Let me help." So the mouse grabbed onto the cat's tail, and now they were all in one long line. The mouse held the cat held the dog held the girl held the grandmother held the old man, and the old man held the enormous turnip. "Ready," shouted the old man. 1, 2, 3, pull." They all pulled together, hearts pounding, muscles straining, and eyes wide with effort. The mouse gave a mighty squeak, and suddenly, pop! Out came the enormous turnip. Everyone tumbled backward, landing in a heap on the ground. The mouse squeaked, the cat yowled, the dog barked, the girl giggled, and the old man and old woman laughed and laughed. They all stared at the turnip lying on the ground. It was huge, bigger than any of them had ever imagined. The old man could hardly believe his eyes. "Well," he said, wiping the sweat from his brow, "that's the biggest turnip I've ever grown." The old woman smiled and said, "It's enormous. What will we do with it?" The granddaughter clapped her hands. "Let's make turnip soup for everyone in the village," she said. So they rolled the enormous turnip to the cottage. It was so big that they had to push it together, inch by inch. The mouse scurried along the edge, the cat and dog pushed with their paws, and the humans leaned in with all their might. Finally, they managed to get it inside and began to prepare a feast. The old woman peeled the turnip, the old man chopped it into huge pieces, and the girl helped by stirring the pot. Soon, a delicious smell filled the air. When the soup was ready, they invited everyone from the village to come and eat. The villagers gathered around the cottage, amazed at the sight of the enormous turnip and the bubbling pot of soup. They ate and ate until everyone was full. There was still plenty left to share. The old man stood up and raised his bowl. "To teamwork," he said with a smile, "it took all of us, big and small, to pull this turnip out of the ground. Even the tiniest mouse helped us succeed." Everyone cheered and clapped, and the mouse squeaked proudly. After that day, the enormous turnip became a story everyone in the village told again and again. The children loved to hear how even the smallest creature had played an important part in helping the others. The old man never forgot it either. The next spring, when he planted his seeds again, he smiled and said, "Grow strong, my little turnip seeds, but not too enormous this time." Still, deep in his heart, he hoped that one day another turnip might grow just as big. But he also remembered the lesson the enormous turnip had taught him, that great things can be done when everyone works together, no matter how big or small they are. As the seasons passed, the old man and woman grew older, but they continued to tend their garden with love. The dog and cat became a little slower, the little girl grew taller, and even the mouse returned from time to nibble on crumbs near the cottage. The story of the enormous turnip was told to every visitor who came to their home. "This," the old man would say, "is where we pulled out the biggest turnip in the world." And the visitors would laugh and look at the garden with amazement. Years later, the little girl became a grown woman. She moved away to another village, but she always remembered the day they all pulled together to free the enormous turnip. Whenever someone said that they couldn't do something because they were too small or too weak, she would smile and tell them the story of the mouse who helped pull a turnip as big as a house. "It doesn't matter how small you are," she would say. "When we work together, we can move mountains, or turnips." The old man continued to garden until his hair turned as white as snow. One morning, he looked at the soil where the turnip once grew and smiled softly. That turnip brought everyone together, he said. It wasn't just a vegetable, it was a reminder that every hand, no matter how small, makes a difference. And indeed, every spring after that, the villagers came together to help one another in the fields. They planted, watered, harvested, and shared their crops, remembering the lesson of the enormous turnip. Whenever someone tried to do everything alone, someone else would laugh and say, "Don't forget the mouse." And everyone would join in. As the years went by, the story of the enormous turnip spread beyond the village. Travelers carried it to other towns and told it to children around campfires. Each time, people laughed at the image of the old man, the old woman, the girl, the dog, the cat, and the tiny mouse all pulling together. But they also nodded in understanding because deep down they knew that it was a story not just about a turnip, but about unity, kindness, and teamwork. Even long after the old man and woman had passed on, their little cottage still stood by the field, surrounded by a new garden full of turnips and flowers. Children would come and visit, pointing to the soil and whispering, "That's where the enormous turnip grew." And every year, someone would plant a new turnip seed in the same spot, hoping that one day another enormous turnip would grow again. But even if it never did, the story lived on in every heart, because everyone who heard it understood that sometimes it takes a whole team, people, animals, and even the smallest of creatures, to achieve something truly great. And so the spirit of the enormous turnip remained alive forever, growing not in the soil, but in the hearts of all who remembered it